What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Shockwave48 here. Welcome back to another video. And today we still got some more info of My Hero Academia Season 6 chapter, and continuing on with the chapter 370. And we are going to get some information of One for All secret Massacre revealed. So he's got some really dark secrets, and I feel like he's got some other up his sleeve right now. What's happening on this chapter? As we already know from the last chapter, we saw that, Spinner was getting a new quirk. He's gotten bigger. He don't know what's going on. Everyone is attacking. The heroes are attacking back. And Shoji tries to hit him with Octoplow. We see his face. We know what he looks like. So the chapter is still coming. So let's see what's going on here. Let's do this. Let's see what's up.
Coming off of the end of the previous chapter, we saw that All For One was nearly being defeated by Izuku until he had his own little moment of power of friendship, I suppose, where he was like, the entire chain of events up until now will inevitably spill out victory or defeat for all. Victory is still within my grasp. Then we cut over to Spinner at the end of the chapter, and that brings us to the beginning of this one, where we see Spinner leading this army of 15,000 heteromorphs. Not just remnants of the Paranormal Liberation Front, of course, but thousands and thousands of just regular civilians. And this goes into what All For One's big plan for Spinner essentially was, where he wanted to build him up into this mascot for this false cause. I mean, the inherent cause is very much legitimate, because as this chapter explores the history of prejudice around the heteromorphs in this world, the people that were born with quirks that alter their appearance. But as for what they're doing here, it's very much false, because it's ultimately what All For One wants. And what he wants is for them to break Kurogiri out of the hospital that he's being detained in currently. And I'm pretty sure that they are successfully going to do this, one way or another. I don't think they're necessarily going to win this portion of the battle or whatever. I mean, maybe they will, but I think it ultimately ends with Kurogiri being broken out of here, because it kind of needs to happen because of Kurogiri's, crazy warping quirk. Because if they do get him out of here, then he'll immediately be able to activate that, and I assume take one or more of the heteromorphic individuals here and then immediately go to UA. And then once they get to UA, then he'll be able to activate the quirk again and take All For One / Shigaraki out of there. And then once he's out of the UA barrier encasement thing, then Aizawa and Monoma will no longer be able to erase his quirks, and then he'll just be able to go ham. Because that's another thing that we haven't seen yet, the full potential of All For One / Shigaraki with all the quirks, fully utilizing his new body. Something that he was talking about in the previous chapter, where he was like, surely you jest, I haven't even used a single quirk yet. I have yet to brandish the true value of this body. So yeah, we're definitely going to see this eventually happen, and I think it's going to happen through them breaking out Kurogiri, and then Kurogiri breaking All For One / Shigaraki out of there. And also, it seems like Izuku is coming to his limit, as it was stated by the second user that he only has 5 minutes to use the full potential of Gear Shift, and I think he's probably going to reach that limit, pass out, and then that's when we go into, I don't know, the second or third act of this fight, where All For One completely takes over and uses the full extent of his power. But as they're all leading to the hospital to take Kurogiri out, we see there's not a lot of heroes here. There's only about 200 along with police squads, and it's definitely not a coincidence that Horikoshi is using wording here as marching and police squads are the defense against this. Obviously it parallels to our reality, and like I said, there very much is a legitimate cause behind this, but it's just ultimately being overshadowed by All For One. And I'll get more into why he's so despicable to do this, other than just using them in the first place. But they're not really effective against pushing them away, because like I said, 200 against 15,000, it's not really going to work out. And even Koda is here trying to fight back, but they wind up just ripping Koda's mask off, calling him a traitor, saying that he lives in the city, because, just like in our world, cities are usually, progressive and more welcoming to accepting everyone, despite how different they could be. But when you get outside of the cities and you go into the smaller rural areas or towns or whatnot, that's when it gets pretty conservative and the prejudice is really evident. It's very much the same in the My Hero world. But also, while this is all happening, we see this masked heteromorph from the Paranormal Liberation Front. We've seen him multiple times, and he's giving this speech, going over everything that we just essentially talked about. But he also says that, the history of the paranormal is a history of violence against what looks different. Order 66, the Great Jedi Purge. Obviously, this is a Star Wars reference. Order 66 is the order that Palpatine
could
gave
be
to the clones to, flip their
like a
switch,
Star Wars
and then they
scene.
suddenly just started taking out all the Jedi. But in this instance, it's referencing this moment in history where like a whole bunch of heteromorphs were just killed seemingly because they look different. Because going further into that, he says, when asked about his reasons, a man that took part in these massacres simply said they...
Do I go biscuit first, or mashed potatoes, or chicken?
That's
like you're looking good.
They were gross. And if we look at this panel of this, Order 66 happening, we can see this guy right here. And I'm pretty sure this is all for one. Like, come on. It looks exactly like him. The same suit, the same proportions of like the jacket and the way that his shirt collar pops over the top of it. Same haircut. He's even reaching up his right hand. He doesn't even have a weapon like the others in this panel because, that's how the all for one quirk works. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is all for one, meaning that he was the one who orchestrated the whole Order 66, or just the massacre against the heteromorphs. And I'm assuming that this is also taking place back in the day because he says history of the quote-unquote paranormal, because that's like how this was referred to back in the day, along with quirks being called meta abilities and whatnot. So yeah, this is like the big tragic secret to all of this, is that All for One was the one who basically spearheaded prejudice against the heteromorphs. And I also think this makes sense because, as the story goes on, we've seen that All for One is essentially behind everything, right? And another thing about, Order 66, like I said, it was orchestrated by Palpatine, the Dark Emperor of the Empire. And obviously that parallels to All for One, who was like the Palpatine of this series, right? So yeah, pretty crazy, tragic twist. I'm not going to say that he invented prejudice against the heteromorphs, because that's kind of just an inherent aspect of some people, for sure. But it seems like he definitely was one of the big reasons, if not the big reason, why there's still like this huge prejudice against heteromorphs in the My Hero world today. I mean, even going so far as to having multiple massacres just because he thought they looked gross. And that goes into him being gross for now using them for his cause. Like, he's just manipulating Spinner. Like, obviously he doesn't care about them. He doesn't care about all of these heteromorphs. Speaking of him using Spinner, we see Spinner in this chapter not even be able to understand what's going on here, because as those speeches are being made, and he's like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Since All for One gave me this power, my mind is going blank. This is in reference to before the war started, All for One like gave Spinner this giant quirk or whatever, and he's like, whatever, I'll just do as I was told and take Kurogiri back. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this means that on top of All for One giving Spinner the giant quirk, he also did something else to make him subservient. It's also necessary because Spinner was never really like All for One's boy. Spinner was more so ride or die for Shigaraki, and he obviously knew that, so he kind of had to do this to make sure that Spinner would do his bidding. But right after this reveal, Shoji suddenly shows up and gives him an octoblow, and Shoji starts trying to be the voice of reason here, despite being called a traitor, of course, which we knew was coming. But he's like, what does attacking the hospital have to do with your cause? Back in the first war, when we invaded Jakku Hospital, the heroes made sure that everyone was evacuated first, like before they started attacking the high-end Nomus and Yujiko and all that stuff. And he's like, what about you guys? Have you even thought about that? And then we actually see some of the heteromorphs like, oh, you're right. Basically trying to get a point across that, like, you're no better than the people who have been prejudiced and used violence against you. And then we get this, like, little flashback of Shoji when he was younger, seemingly in his hometown, wearing, like, these bandages on his face. We see somebody saying, like, no matter how far we progress, we'll never accept that tainted blood of yours. And I'm pretty sure this is what we heard about Shoji in the Ultra Analysis book, which is also unfortunate because Horikoshi could have very much went into this in the story at some point, but I guess he just didn't because he realized that nobody would care about it. But in the Ultra Analysis book, it says, in Shoji's hometown, there is still prejudice against those whose bodies are altered outwardly by their quirks, and people were often frightened of him. He started wearing his signature mask because his face made a young girl cry, and he didn't want to be the cause of anyone's sadness. But speaking of wearing a mask, at the end of this chapter, his mask comes off. We see his face for the first time in the series, and it's pretty much what we expected, I guess, right? Because the way that the mask forms to his face, it doesn't really leave much to the imagination. But he also has these scars on his face, and I guess this also goes back, how he was treated in his hometown. I'm pretty sure they probably did that to him. But we also saw his face before, if you were able to see, like, the pre-series sketches that Horikoshi made, I guess, like the rough drafts of the characters, like, he pretty much still looks the same to this day, aside from the scars. But in reference to him saying, did you guys even think about evacuating people from the hospital? Like, you're going to hurt all of these innocent people. And he's like, well, if the answer is no, well, then I'll never forgive you. And yeah, that's where the chapter ends, and really good stuff here. This was a really interesting chapter, really thought-provoking, and it's just too bad that this for sure isn't going to get a lot of attention. Like, a lot of people aren't going to care about this chapter because it doesn't revolve around Izuku, Bago, or Shoto, but it is what it is. Let me know what you thought about this chapter in the comments.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I was right for knowing that, All For One using these villains for his advantages, for his evil plan. Because All For One's been around for a long time, and he's been fighting with All Might for years, and, stealing people's power, and, I never seen no, intention being, Deku as a child, but, he wasn't there for him, but I don't know about his story with those two all, but all I'm saying is, All For One is just using these people for his evil plans, and the villains don't see it. They really think that All For One is the true warrior of all this, and even though they don't see, they're blindsided because they don't see that they're being used or been manipulated. But still, the hero's gonna have to find a way to fix all of this or tell them the truth, or otherwise they're just gonna keep attacking the heroes and get the purple smoke guy out of the hospital. So I think that's what's gonna happen. And I'm pretty sure Deku might end up maxing out, who knows. But, as he keeps on fighting Shigaraki and stuff, I'm pretty sure he's not going to give up. So, I have a good I have a good feeling that, there'll be some times when, and to my point of perspective, I feel like they're going to fall back, wait for a bit, and then come back fighting until they'll be able to, take on each other on round 2. So, yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. And I'll be back with another video very soon. So, later.